It is time for us to continue with the next conversation on our schedule. And this one introduces something slightly different because we're going to be addressing sustainability concerns in blockchain and basically how the industry can build up environmental resilience. Moderating this panel, making a return to the stage, is May Ben Khadra from CNBC Arabia, and she will have a panel of esteemed guests. So please do welcome them to the stage.
Everyone, and welcome back. A second day of the Cardano Summit, and of course this is something that we've been waiting for a while, and discussing the environmental impact of blockchain technologies. Now we know that there's huge room and potential for growth for blockchain technologies, but I think it's our responsibility to make sure that this growth is aligned with our sustainability agenda. And at the same time, I believe blockchain technologies can actually help us achieve this agenda. So we're going to talk about this very interesting topic, and I would like to start with you, Alexander, first, because there's a lot of criticism toward blockchain technologies and how much they consume energy. So to what extent are we seeing innovations around this topic to actually decrease this energy consumption?
Very good question. And I challenge the question. I don't necessarily agree that blockchains use too much energy, because what we use energy for always needs a use case. Like, why do we spend kilowatt hours? Why do we spend energy on something? In the beginning, nobody really questioned the energy consumption of the internet either. Currently, we don't question the energy consumption of all the GPUs that run the AI models. Energy consumption in the blockchain space really is about security and providing the layer for that permissionless property which blockchain can provide. Do blockchains need proof of work to function? Generally, no. But in my opinion, there is one single blockchain where that makes a lot of sense. Do blockchains which enable business cases need to work with proof of work? Do they need the same security as a global financial system like Bitcoin does? No. Which is precisely why Ethereum transitioned to proof of stake, which is precisely why Cardano works with proof of stake. And the energy consumption of proof of stake networks is really minimal.
So I want to discuss as well to what extent can we rely on blockchain technologies to enhance sustainability. And I'm coming to you, Mr. Maher, and tell us about Alserkal Group and how does it rely on blockchain technologies when it comes to achieving the sustainability agenda?
Sure, thank you for the question. I just wanted to make sure that we're clear, understanding what blockchain is as well, to make sure that we use it for the right cases. And I agree with Alexis, all about the use cases need to be there. So for example, I'll start with example, it's better. We have a lot of entities where we're actually very sustainable when it comes to circular economy. So we established the first plant in the Middle East region where we actually take the waste management. When we take this waste management, we make sure that these wastes are tracked. So one of the things that we're evaluating, apart from the AI model, the digital twin model we're trying to develop, how do we make sure that we put this information on the blockchain? Why do we put it on the blockchain? To make sure it's transparent, everybody able to see the waste, so you'll be able to track the waste. So you're making sure, first of all, the records are available. People will not be able to tamper the record. You make sure that they are traceable, so you know the origin of the waste that you have today, and then it is auditable. Easier, so nobody can go around it. So when it becomes, this is how it becomes sustainable. From the question you asked earlier on energy, I think when you actually make it such efficient process and you track it in blockchain, over a period of time, it becomes automatically very efficient because you don't have to do so multiple work and multi-layering. So that also helps on the future one as well. So when it comes to vendor management, and we do import lots of things globally. So we run a train business, so we import trains for the country, so we're the sole agent for that. And we also import other materials for the factories that we have. So we need to make sure that these companies and vendors that we're dealing with there, they're actually using their processes in a sustainable manner. So some of the trains are not sustainable, which are the DMU diesel ones, but the EMU, the electric trains, are sustainable. So when you when you put them on a blockchain, you're able to track your supply chain. And the supply chain, when it comes to scope 3, are the hardest part to really track and work upon. And one of the things I was advocating in the Circular Economy Council, which I sit over there, let's not really focus on scope 3, but let's focus on 1 or 2, because whoever works in 1 or 2 themselves, automatically the will become absolutely. So that's some of the usages and examples of how would blockchain really help when it comes to sustainability.
So does it matter which industry are we talking about, Alexis? I mean, when you look at blockchain technology and what it can do for achieving sustainability agenda and addressing scope 1 and 2 as well, does it really have to do with certain industries, or this is something that we can broadly say that it applies to different industries and different sectors?
That's a great question, and I think it applies across all industries, because what blockchain, especially through synergies with other technologies like IoT and AI, really does is form digital infrastructure that can help manage data, that can automate the flows of complex sets of information around emissions across supply chains. And I think it's a pretty universal process that applies in industries like oil and gas, where we do a lot of work, in supply chain management, as well as in blockchain and decentralized networks, because the information is very similar. And it needs to be widely shared, it needs to be trusted and verified, and it needs to be able to be represented in a permanent and transferable way. So these are universal challenges that I think blockchain can solve.
So this is interesting. When we look at what is known as crypto carbon ratings, Lena, there's this big question of how do you measure it? I mean, what kind of metrics or methodologies do you depend on and you rely on with your experience in this topic? To what extent is it difficult to make this kind of measurement?
So there are definitely some frameworks that have been already also used for some time one could rely on. So carbon accounting, scope 1, 2, and 3 measurement and assessment has already been around for several years, even decades. And I think the blockchain industry can profit heavily on also looking and applying them as well and adhere to these standards. So one important is the GHG protocol, which is the widely used framework to do corporate carbon accounting. And one principal aspect within that is to rely on activity data to the most extent possible. And one inherent characteristic of blockchain technology is actually this transparency. And we have a lot of on-chain data that we can rely on to do assessments, so we know about the transaction counts, the node counts, and we can get this data much more easily compared to other industries where it's really hard to get data. But at the same time, blockchain is also inherently decentralized. And this is something which is also challenging in assessing blockchain networks. And what we do at CCRI is that we set up nodes on different hardware devices and really measure the electricity consumption under different transaction loads. And by doing so, we can then build models that we can extend then to the entire network based on the node count and the transaction count, which we can track on a daily basis. And by doing so, do assessments on a daily basis. And this can then be translated into carbon emissions by looking at node locations, by again applying principles from the GHG protocol that are already out there for quite some time and one can rely on.
That's beautiful. Clark, I want to come to you, and Zumo is focused on providing financial solutions in the blockchain space. So how is your company addressing the environmental concerns regarding these transactions?
Thank you, Maine. Good morning, everyone. Easier said than done, I would say. Yeah, I think that is a business was 6 years old, is Zumo, okay? And I'm going to answer the question as the Chief Operating Officer, so I'm going to put the operating layer above the answer. So our purpose at Zumo is to essentially to build a financial future, one that creates opportunities, protects people, and also leaves a better place for our planet. Okay, so straightforward, you would think. Okay, is how do we apply that? I think as an organisation, you have to think of, I've seen on far too many occasions, that sustainability and ESG, it forms a part of a business strategy, but it's on a peripheral vision. So there is always competing demands, whether it's growth, revenue, whatever it may be. And at Zumo, we have a very different approach. We ensure that it's not in our peripheral vision, ESG and sustainability, but is in our full vision, in focus. And knowing that and applying that, you can actually invoke positive change. Okay. So I say we're 6 years old as a business. From day one, we've had our own sustainability director. We are deep contributors to governing bodies, organizations, so we build out our expertise. So that's a bit about Zumo and our purpose, okay? How we do it, in what we do. So we build that purpose, staying very true to it, into the fabric of our organization, right? Every member of our team, and they're all fantastic, understands the part they play in sustainability. And we also understand that part we play to society, to our planet, and also building and innovating on a daily basis. So by understanding that, we have to look at the what. And we found ourselves, in Zumo, we are a digital asset and blockchain infrastructure business. So what we do is build business critical infrastructure for financial organizations to help them and very simply and seamlessly offer digital asset solutions to their customers, okay? And in building that, we wanted, as a business, we wanted to also recognize 2 years ago that our own carbon footprint, because we actually deal with, we're in the blockchain and that crypto space. And we found very quickly there was not a solution in the market, in the global market, that would account for that. So through organic innovation, we created a solution which we launched to actually address our own ESG impact. We launched that last June in Money 2020. It was a pioneering solution then. It still is today in the world's first. And we call that Zumo Oxygen. So what we're able to do is to measure, mitigate, improve the energy consumption born of the blockchain. So we simplify it in that sense. So we apply that to ourselves, but that solution is what we actually offer our clients. And as a result of that, it was Q4 of last year, we worked with a London-based asset manager who launched Europe's first spot Bitcoin ETF, and we actually powered the green credentials of that through our Zumo Oxygen solution. So I guess in summary, it's having a very clear purpose and staying on purpose, on track. Having ESG and sustainability very in our focus, our line of sight, and also creating the teams in the infrastructure to deliver. That's how we invoke positive change.
That's beautiful. And when I look at financial markets since the start of the year, two main topics were really trending. The first one, of course, crypto assets with the launch of spot ETFs for Bitcoin, and that was a huge driver for crypto assets across the board and institutional investors as well. And the second was AI. I mean, you've all seen what is happening with NVIDIA, with any stock that has to do with AI, or is just discussing the potential of AI and investing there. So I want to ask you, Alexis, to what extent would AI play a role in how blockchain technologies can actually drive sustainability agendas?
Yeah, it's really interesting. In our great keynote last night, Don Tapscott calls this convergence of IoT and AI and blockchain the trivergence. And what it's really about is automating in as complete a way as possible the process of capturing emissions data, registering that information, third-party verifying it, reporting on it, and then being able to find new ways to mitigate it. And I think it's a really important combination because there's such massive volumes of data involved, especially in emissions accounting in industries like we work in, the oil and gas industry. And I think there's a really big opportunity here to create pretty much fully autonomous systems. So in the future, you'd be able to have for example, an oil and gas facility where you have thousands of IoT sensors capturing data about the emissions, registering them on chain, having a programmatic AI-powered verification of that data, and then being able to use blockchain and tokenization to automatically offset that the emissions of this facility on pretty much a daily basis. And I think this is the kind of innovation and automation that we need to be able to fulfill the goals of the energy transition, because manual spreadsheet-based processes are really not going to get us there.
That's beautiful. So Lena, with your experience with CCRI and with crypto carbon ratings, so to what extent do you think that you can rely more and more on AI when it comes to measuring the footprint, the carbon footprint of blockchain technologies? Is this something that you're looking at?
I think this is generally a very good question on how AI can help to look more into the carbon footprint of different blockchain systems. But I think ultimately it's something that needs to be also a bit distinguished from each other, because we cannot throw AI on everything. And what AI can really help is to get a better sense of what is maybe going on between systems. But at the same time, I think we need to make sure that first the basics are there. And we are still also figuring out, when looking at the sustainability impact of blockchain system, on what metrics we use, who needs to report what, and what needs to be done in the first place to make sure that there is more transparency out there, that also consumers can distinguish between the environmental impact of different systems. So for example, Alex already mentioned the differences between proof of work and proof of stake, and they are enormous. And I think adding these nuances first before going one level deeper and looking more and more into the impacts and how AI can help also to maybe also more the managing side, what you were covering, Alex, to help there mitigating the climate impact. But for the measuring topic first, I think it's more on getting the essentials right in the first place now.
So I want to get back to you, Mr. Maher, and when you look at the future of blockchain, let's move to this area now. To what extent do you think that there is future for blockchain technologies in the cultural and arts sector?
Can I give an example before that
Please.
on AI and digital twin, if you don't mind?
Yes, please.
There's some of the things we're working on, like one of the plants we have, which is the only one in the Middle East, where we capture all the waste from the food industries that we have in the food establishment in Dubai, which are about 13,000 hotels, restaurants, and coffee shops and so forth. What we're trying to build is AI. I know AI is a cliche. I'm doing my second doctorate in AI, so in sustainability. So it's more of machine learning, to be honest with you. It's a weak AI we're living at this point of time. So what we're trying to build as a predictive model is how do we make sure that we can access the waste faster? And once you access the waste faster, that means you're able to reduce the impact of CO2 and methane emission from all these food establishments in the city and in the country and wherever you're going to be working on. Now, club that with digital twin, that the factories we want to build and the factories that we have, we want to make sure that we build them digitally and make sure that they are the most optimized before we build them physically. And when they are on the physical world, then you need to make sure that all the sensors that you have, the IoT you mentioned about, will be able to read the data. And there are a huge amount of data because they will be supporting you in terms of doing proactive maintenances. So you also reduce the energy usages because you don't have to go through a breakdown, which will consume more energy. So you use the blockchain also over there. And this is how you, not the trio, but you bring everything together. Digital twin, predictive modeling, which is AI, IoT, and the blockchain. Coming back to the question of the art, I think it's an evolving place. Not yet there. I've not seen any application for it. We've got an art foundation. We also have Alserkal Avenue. Those who stay in Dubai probably need to go and see it. It's an amazing place where we actually promote arts quite extensively. One possible or couple of possible uses I can foresee can be happening in the future when we use blockchain, making sure that we support all the art foundation and projects which are actually for purpose of sustainable, i.e., there are good cause behind them. And not just overall. And of course, the material that you're sourcing are also from sustainable ways. So you can also maintain your blockchain in terms of making sure the data that you have from the supply chain are maintained in the blockchain, so you'll be able to track them to make sure that the material you're sourcing for the art are sustainable as well.
This is very interesting. And I want to take it to you, Alexander. And I want you to tell us what kind of future do you see for blockchain when it comes to environmental resilience? I mean, looking 10 years from today, where do you think blockchain would be in the area of environmental resilience?
Without a crystal ball.
In terms of, I think again, it's the energy consumption for blockchain really is about operating the network. And if we consider the blockchain to continue evolve and to continue to be adopted by multiple use cases, and to, if in 10 years we are at the state where we are hyper blockchainized in this world, similarly as we are currently hyper internetized, the amount of nodes and the amount of transactions that need to be processed increases. What's important on the environmental resilience side in that aspect is that we limit the amount of useful nodes on the network. And Cardano here takes really a unique approach with certain parameters that incentivize or disincentivize new operators to join the stake pool operator network and to run a node after a certain point. This parameter is called K, and it really governs the optimal amount of nodes in the network. That can be changed up and down, but unlike in Ethereum where you have a fixed amount of Ethereum up until January when they have a new update, the amount of nodes in the network really grows with the amount of stake, which scales indefinitely up to the point where there's no more Ethereum left. And other blockchains take a completely different approach, like BNB or Tron, where they have a completely federated network of stake pools where there's 21 or 28 different pools. In my personal view, that's very centralized. It's not in the cradle of a blockchain. So I think Cardano is uniquely positioned due to their incentive mechanisms of onboarding those nodes and letting them operate, let them doing their job, also for in 10 years.
That's beautiful. And I have to discuss here regulations, because government regulations is impacting sustainability agenda for different industries, for the private and public sector as well. So I would like to ask you, Clark, I mean, when you look at the EU and it's launching the first crypto-specific sustainability legislation, to what extent do you think that we need other similar regulatory frameworks across the globe?
Great question. In MiCA, I see it as, so MiCA is new, okay, and certainly the element of recognizing the sustainability disclosure requirement as a part of this new regulation, which comes into force, I think it's 30th of December. I see it as a great opportunity for other regulators around the world to look.
Why?
To look deep into the EU and MiCA, because this is a new regulation, and anything new, you would expect iteration and some form of change, okay? I see it as a great opportunity. As an operator, as a COO, I'm always looking for improvements in our processes or and how we regulate and what we actually do. I'm sure it won't be the first and probably not the last regulation, which is new, that will come into force in a country, that it will have its highs and lows. And I think there's the opportunity, certainly for the UAE and other regulators around the world, to look deep into that engine room of MiCA, of the EU, understand what went well, and mirror that and do it better to invoke positive change, but also look at what didn't go quite well and be very honest and truthful with ourselves. That if there's an opportunity to change, apply that change and apply it in a very quick manner. I think with regulation, and certainly in our industry, we're innovating, we are going at pace, and I think through collaboration with the regulators and legislation, through industry experts like ourselves, that's how we can invoke that positive change.
I have a slight opinion. I had the benefit to work in Europe and I was covering the European countries, all of them back in my city banker. Europe is very advanced when it comes to regulation. They're very strong in them. But unfortunately, the challenge becomes like, how do you make sure that everybody's really work with them along with the regulation? And that's where a lot of wrong practices happens. So the MiCA is coming up by end of this year, 30th of December, with the exception of Chapter 3 and 4, already in effect in June of this year itself. What we're trying to do over here, we do not issue any policies believing that we know it all. We actually go to the subject matter expert, whether it's cryptocurrencies related to any digital currencies from that perspective, or AI, or metaverse, or even circular economy. We speak to the private sectors. If we believe that the policy that we have now is about 80% workable within the country, and it will help and support the ecosystem, and then we launch it. And then I go back to what you said. Then we go and continuously improve over that. And this is how I think the policy framework should come up. It should not stifle any innovation. It's important to have. Without regulation, we cannot work. We need to have regulation. So, but it should be in a way, in a manner that it is consultative with the private sectors, because we want to make sure that they also flourish while you're coming up with the regulations. And then you continuously come up with new additions and papers. But also be open to look at what European Union is doing, what Singapore is doing, what is their model in it. We actually learn from them, to be honest with you, before we issue our own cryptocurrencies regulations. So I think if we follow that approach, and if we collaborate together globally and such a spirit, I think we'll be able to make much more strides going forwards.
So legislation has to be accompanied by knowledge. You need to know what you are regulating in order to come up with the right regulations and the right legal framework for its operations.
If you speak to most of the regulators, not all, don't understand.
They don't understand. And still they come up with a legal framework for something they don't quite understand. Lena, to what extent do you think that regulations and having certain legal framework is important when it comes to crypto carbon rating?
So I think it's important to have some more standardization and guidelines towards how you assess something and what you assess. I think also Clark already mentioned that they wanted to look like 2 or 3 years ago into emissions related to crypto, and there was essentially nothing there back then. Since then there has been quite some progress in the space from academic side, but also from the private sector. But still, it is a new industry, it is still not totally harmonized, and it also cannot be, but their regulation can really push forward in putting some guidelines there, or also put the topic on the agenda to strive towards more consistency, harmonization, and transparency in the methodologies and the source supplied. And for example, there I think the MiCA regulation is a good example, because, for example, on the sustainability indicators that they're proposing, they are already proposing something, so everyone is reporting the same thing. Of course, you can argue if the indicators are the perfect choice. I think everyone has a bit of a different opinion on what could have been done better, but there is something that is agreed on now which is comparable, and I think that is helping a lot. And then also they are asking to publish the sources of the methodologies applied, and also the underlying data and the input data, and this helps quite a bit to verify the metrics that are being put forward, which is something that was quite hard to make over the past years. So we have already tried to be very transparent about our methodologies. We have started in academic research, have already published our papers there, that it was sure that it is open source and also peer-reviewed. But now coming to private companies, we still trying to adhere to these standards, but this hasn't been mandatory before. And then there has been quite some variance in how could you verify the methodologies, the input data, and everything that is involved. And I think there the regulation can really help to put some more trust and harmonization in these methodologies.
So you mentioned this variance, and when I look globally, and I want your opinion, Alexis, to what extent should we have harmony between the regulatory environment regarding blockchain and its environmental impact and sustainability agenda? To what extent this kind of regulation should be harmonized across different regions in the world?
I think that's extremely important, and we're seeing a lot of harmonization going on in different financial regulations globally, as well as regulations for emissions management in the oil and gas industry. So at GuildOne, we work with Open Footprint Forum, which is a very large data standards organization for emissions in the oil and gas industry, as well as an organization called PPDM, which developed globally accepted standards and taxonomies for how data is represented in oil and gas. And because, much like oil and gas, cryptocurrency, digital assets are such a global industry, it makes sense to have that kind of harmonization because it's a technology that's not bound by jurisdictions. And I think that also I would just want to add to Alexander's point that as the world is shifting more and more towards sustainable infrastructure, regulations like MiCA and this enhanced reporting on emissions and these new technologies that are starting to be able to track emissions more accurately in decentralized environments are going to allow the industry to compare very favorably against, the very traditional infrastructure-heavy financial system that, is currently dominant. And I think that's going to be a market advantage in the future.
So I would like to hear your thoughts, Alexander, on this topic.
I'd like to pick up on a couple of points that Maher said and Lena confirmed in different words. Regulation and private industry or reality very often is disjoint. Currently, unfortunately, in my opinion, in MiCA very much so. They're overgeneralizing in their wording, specifically in MiCA, to publish metrics or publish data that don't match all the chains or they're overfit, and that creates for most of the blockchains that don't fit that model that they foresee useless data. And Lena said in the very beginning, yes, it's an open blockchain and it's, we have a lot of data because it's transparent, but how much data do we really have? Every node operator has backup nodes on the side because they need to be operationally resilient, otherwise they wouldn't be a stable node. How many nodes behind an actual node do you count towards? Where do you draw the line for block producing nodes that progress the chain? Is it consensus based, or is it every single node in a network that's somehow connected, including those that don't produce blocks? There are all these questions which are not addressed at all in MiCA, and I think there is a big gap at the moment between regulation and what should really happen. And we strive to open a conversation with the regulators from the Cardano Foundation to have a correction, as you said, Clark, that it's the first version, it's good, and regulation creates clarity and transparency, which is good for the whole industry, especially if you think of harmonizing across the whole world. And improving is always the best way.
Mm-hmm. So, Clark, what kind of regulations would you like to see with regards to blockchain technologies and their environmental impact?
Great question. I think that out with the type of regulation, it has to be that framework, okay? But I think it has to harmonize with the pace at which innovation is growing, right? Because otherwise there is going to be that disconnect. Regulation will have a blueprint such as a MiCA, and we try and build around those parameters of that. But I think there is a greater opportunity for the private sector expert companies to be able to work with the regulators on what does the next 2, 3 or 5 years look like. And to your point around that 80%, how do we get to that 90%, but having that positive change? Understanding what's happened, how do we progressively move it, but always looking ahead. I think out with the specifics of the regulation is just align it with the innovation and the growth of this sector.
Mr. Maher, what would you like to see in terms of regulations and legal framework?
I think, first of all, overall arching is how do we collaborate and put up a framework on regional sectors, and then take it up and harmonize it with various bodies. Like, we have the UN. I normally don't believe in them, but anyway, something like that for blockchain and for other industries as well. I think that will bring and bridge the gap between various industry players. Because this is a technology, you've asked the question to Alexa whether in 10 years' time it's going to be there or not. It's a very long time. With the advent of AI, blockchain will be penetratable, by the way. And if you have quantum computing on top of it, you may have a different technology altogether. But before that happens, I think it's important that we bring more people together, and then we can harmonize that, or collaborate in terms of having the right set of technology that requires, so we can make sure that this can be used more easily, a lot of people. And the different framework that you have between the various providers of blockchain technologies, how do we make sure it's just interoperable? The framework are also harmonized, that's also important.
So I still have 3 minutes before I wrap up the panel. And I would like to ask each of you, what topic would you like Cardano Summit 2025 to discuss next year? I'll start with you, Alexis.
Sure. Well, I think a really interesting topic is how token economics can be applied to sustainability in decentralized systems. There's a great project that was announced this year called the Green Crypto Mining Initiative, where Bitcoin miners can earn additional rewards if they have certified renewable energy. And I think it would be really interesting to explore that in the context of staking and other consensus mechanisms. We can actually build in sustainability into the economies of these networks.
That's beautiful. Lena?
I think for me it would be most interesting to hear next year how really the MiCA regulation, which is then there by more or less 1 year, turned out to be implemented by the relevant players. So from a sustainability point of view, how did that match then the industry? Alexander already mentioned that there are still some things that are not fitting. How were they addressed, or were they addressed also from the regulatory side? So how this is coming into practice, and how the interpretation of the MiCA went forward, as we have also seen with other regulations that came first, were very new, very hard to understand, and then were understood from all sides along the way. So I think that would be really interesting for me to hear.
Mr. Maher.
Two things from my side. I think one is we are trying to make some stride on IoT data. I want to see how the application going to be of that in the future on a widespread. Second, I would like to see the gap analysis being carried out between various regulations globally, and how can we make sure that how the gap can be, for example, addressed.
Clark.
I think in the spirit of continual improvement, looking back to see how have we done in this last 12 months. How did MiCA land? And certainly looking at the regulators, the global regulators, what are the learnings and what positive changes can be put in place?
Now, I know, Alexander, you are representative of the Cardano Foundation, but still, if you are to pick a topic for the Cardano Summit 2025, what would it be?
In terms of sustainability?
Anything that has to do with blockchain, not necessarily
Update to MiCA?
Then this is a topic that we have to make sure it's on the agenda next year. Thank you so much for joining us. You made this panel has a great added value and great insights. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you as well.